Good morning. Today's scripture lesson comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 11, verses 17 through 37. Now hear the word of the Lord. When Jesus arrived, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now Bethany was near Jerusalem, some 2 miles away, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them about their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, while Mary stayed at home. Martha said to Jesus, "Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that God will give you whatever you ask of him." Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in me, even though they die, will live, and everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" She said to him, "Yes, Lord, I believe that you're the Messiah, the Son of God, the one coming into the world." When she had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary and told her privately, "The teacher is here, and he's calling for you." And when she heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still at the place where Martha had met him. The Jews who were with her in the house consoling her saw Mary get up quickly and go out. They followed her because they thought that she was going to the tomb to weep there. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him?" But some of them said, "Could he not, who opened the eyes of the blind men, have kept this man from dying?" The word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God. For the past several weeks, I've been preaching about things we need and things we agree on. And things we agree on always make me preach with a little bit of trepidation, because whatever it is we say we agree on, somebody isn't going to agree with it. But I'm going to guess that at least this morning I'm on fairly firm territory. Because I think we can all agree that in the time of death, comfort is a good thing. That in the time of death, comfort's a good thing. I suspect that's something we can agree on. Now, having said that we agree about it, there are a lot of people who have butterflies in their stomach when they try to do it. If you have friends, and sometimes even within the family, if there has been a death, there are people who are absolutely petrified of going to visit. And the number one reason I hear why they're scared of going is because they say, "I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say when I go into a home where there's been a death." And that's very understandable. One of the reasons I think it's understandable is because when we go into a home where there's been death, we never know quite what we're going to find, because everybody grieves differently, don't we? Everybody grieves differently, and so if somebody grieves differently than I do, I may not know what to say. I may not know what to do. Well, as I told the children this morning, one of the safest things is always to offer the Kleenex box, because everybody understands that. You're giving permission for crying or for blowing your nose or whatever it is, and you don't have to say a word, so that's always good standby. But it occurs to me that maybe one of the reasons we're nervous about going to see someone when there's been a death in the family is because we don't understand grief in the first place. So I want to walk us through that this morning. Grief is one of those things that doesn't look the same on everybody, but as it turns out, everybody goes through what are called stages of grief. And there are at least 5 stages of grief. Some of you might remember having read the book or maybe seen the movie Gone with the Wind. Remember Gone with the Wind? And towards the end of the movie, after the war, during the Reconstruction time, when Rhett and Scarlett are living in Atlanta, their little girl dies. And Rhett takes the little girl and closes the door to the room and refuses to schedule a funeral, which of course causes a huge scandal. And nobody knows what to do. Nobody can talk to her. Until, of course, finally Miss Melanie comes. And Miss Melanie goes in, and Margaret Mitchell does not record what was said. She doesn't tell us what was said in the room at the time. But the next morning, they come out, and they're ready to schedule the funeral. Now that was a serious case of denial. And denial is one of those stages of grief. Now, most of us don't do it as extreme as that one, but some of us have that sense of denial in that stage of grief when we say, I can't believe this happened. Or maybe we'll say, but I just saw them 2 days ago. And of course, the stages of grief are not limited to death. They also deal with flooding, like in a hurricane, or a home burning down if the gas explodes in the house. It can happen when there's a job loss. It could happen when the cancer diagnosis comes along. All of those trigger the stages of grief. And sometimes that denial stage, I can't believe this is happening, it's like a nightmare. So that maybe one of the reasons we're nervous about going into a home where there's been a death is because we didn't know what the denial stage looks like. But one of the things to remember when we go into those kinds of homes is that denial is perfectly natural. It is so natural that it's been mapped out. It is perfectly natural, and if somebody is going through the denial stage, you can think to yourself, yep, this is normal. There's nothing wrong with this person. I don't have to fix it. One of the other stages is called bargaining. And Mary and Martha, in this morning story, give us a perfect example. You know, the grief support group met this morning. And the grief support group understands perfectly well nobody's going to cure anybody else of grief. What we do is we say, here are the stages of grief, and sometimes we say, I think I'm in this stage of grief right now. And somebody else will say, I had not thought about it, but have you thought maybe you might be in this stage? And together we say, I wonder where we are in the process of grief. Which stage are we in? And that group would have nodded very sagely. They would have listened to the story and they'd say, well, yes, Mary and Martha are in the bargaining stage. Jesus, if you had been here, then my brother would not have died. Both of them say this. That's a bargain. In more modern terms, we sometimes hear the stories, oh Lord, if this isn't true, then I'll become a priest, or I'll do whatever, I'll give up whatever. But that's a bargaining that goes on, and it frequently goes on with God. God gets included in this bargaining process. And so sometimes if you and I go into a home or make a visit where there's been a death, then we can hear that bargaining going, if I had just paid better attention, if we had just found this disease early, if only we had taken this medication after all. That's a bargaining stage. And you don't have to panic when it happens. It's perfectly natural. There's nothing wrong with it. Everybody goes through it to some degree or another. Some people do it for a long time, some people do it for a short time. But bargaining is one of those very natural stages of grief. Now, one of the problems that you and I have is that we read the Bible in English. And English sometimes cannot convey what the ancient Greek was saying. And this morning's story has part of that in it. If the grief support group could read ancient Greek, they would have immediately picked up on the fact, oh, there's a stage of grief. When we get to verse 33, it says, when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was. And there we have a translation problem. The New Revised Standard Version said he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. And that's okay. If you read other English translations, they'll have different words because all translators struggle with those two words. But in the ancient Greek, those two words both have an underpinning of anger. Somewhere along the line, Jesus is angry. And so the grief support group would have said, oh yes, well, he's going through the anger stage. Perfectly natural. Happens to everybody. That probably makes us nervous. If you and I arrive at a home where somebody has moved into the anger stage of grief, that can be a little on the scary side. People take out their anger in grief in some funny ways. Sometimes they kick the dog. The dog didn't do anything. Or sometimes they yell at the children. Children haven't done anything wrong. Sometimes there's a big fight with the spouse, and it's over something really stupid. And all of that is the anger that's coming in, because anger in human beings kicks in the adrenal glands. And the adrenaline gives us energy, and we can do something. So that when you go into a situation where there's been death, or any kind of loss, and you witness the anger, one of the things you can say is, this is the anger stage. It's perfectly natural. And sometimes your friend will say, I don't know why I'm so angry. And you'll say, because you're going through the grief process. There's nothing wrong with you. Some of you may have, on occasion, read the book of Job. I don't know if you've ever tried to read the book of Job. Job is the Bible's best attempt at answering the question, why do bad things happen to good people? And you slog through the entire book. It's a long haul. You slog through the entire book of Job, and it doesn't answer the question. It's a very frustrating book. But it's very interesting, because if you read the first 2 chapters carefully, all these disasters happened to Job. You remember? He didn't have a hurricane, he had a tornado. And it wipes out all of his barns and all of his food. And then another storm comes along and kills all of his children. And if that wasn't bad enough, then he's hit with a disease that he's covered head to foot with sores. He's afraid he might be contagious, and so he moves out of the house. And his 3 friends come to see him. Now, the Bible is not kind to these 3 friends, because these 3 friends are trying to figure out what's going on, and mostly they give a lot of bad theology. But if you read carefully the 2nd chapter, the first thing that these 3 friends do is very correct. Because the Bible says that they sat with Job for 7 days and didn't say anything. Now, the grief support group would look at their group card and say, oh, Job entered the depression stage. Depression is the exact opposite of anger. Anger kicks in the adrenal glands. You've got a lot of energy. Let's go do stuff. Depression saps you of energy. Depression is when you don't want to get out of bed, or in Job's case, you don't want to get off the ash heap. And at least for starters, these 3 friends did exactly the right thing. They just sat there. They didn't have to say anything. If they'd had a Kleenex box, they might have handed him a Kleenex box. Because when someone goes through the stages of grief, depression is perfectly normal. There's nothing wrong with them. When you and I go into that situation, if we get there and somebody's going through the depression stage, that might be a word of comfort. You know what? There's nothing wrong with you. This is perfectly fine. And then there's the acceptance stage. And the acceptance stage usually is a long time coming. You really have to wait for that to be around. And most people don't notice when it happens. It's sort of a gradual thing. You get up one morning and you suddenly think, oh, I went a whole hour without remembering that so-and-so has died. Well, looky there, I went a half a day before I thought about the death. And the acceptance stage begins to creep in. The acceptance stage is one of those places where finally maybe some words are going to be helpful. Words like, Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Those who believe in him shall not die, but shall have eternal life. I think one of the things that you and I can agree on is that comfort during the time of death is a good thing. And when you and I function like the body of Christ, when we're like Jesus, we go to see the family who has lost someone to death. Maybe it will be helpful to know, you know what, I don't know what stage I'm walking into, but I'm ready. It may be the bargaining stage. It may be the denial stage. It could be the anger stage. It could be the depression stage. And all of that is normal. Maybe there's going to be the beginning of the acceptance stage eventually. The acceptance stage is not permanent. Because you may go and they'll say, I don't know, it's been 10 years since my mother died. I don't know why I'm so depressed about her today. And you'll say, well, is this a birthday? Is this the day that the diagnosis came? Because those can be triggers that even during the acceptance phase, you can go back and revisit the earlier stages of grief. But to go, to sit, you don't have to know what to say. You might take a Kleenex box. You probably don't have to do anything. To be comfortable yourself, to say, you know what, this is one of the stages of grief. It's fine, it's normal, there's nothing wrong. And maybe that will help us when we go. Because I think that comfort during the time of death is something we agree on. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.